while visiting Atlanta, we made a point of getting over to Kennesaw Mountain, which is on the outskirts of the city, to see the Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park. And for those not familiar with it, this was essentially the Confederate Army's sort of last stand against General Sherman from the Union Army as he was on his march to the sea, which eventually took him through Atlanta and burned it, and it was a huge turning point in the Civil War. This battle took place in late June, early July of 1864. And you commented as we were doing the trails up the mountain, how crazy it would have been thinking about doing it in wool uniforms in the summer.
We're here on New Year's Day, and it's about 72 degrees and 75% humidity. And a couple of the signs referenced how hot and humid and muggy it was the day that they, basically the couple of days they had their battle. And I'm thinking, yeah, all the people huffing and puffing up the hill today on a trail that's been actually made to go up this mountain. I can't imagine going straight up the mountain in wool uniforms in the heat of summer, carrying your rifles and muskets and everything else that they had with them. And yeah, so power to both sides for all that they went through during the Civil War.
It is amazing to think what they went through. And this was, in this area, during the Civil War, at the time, there was about 100,000 Union troops, about 65,000 Confederate troops. And the Confederates kept kind of falling back as they were trying to stop Sherman on his way to Atlanta. And they finally dug in at Kennesaw Mountain here as sort of their last stand. And you can still see a lot of the earthwork that's there, the trenches that they dug and things they were doing as defensive measures. And if you make it all the way to the top, which is not quite a mile, if you hike up the trail to the top, there are still 4 cannon up there. So you have cannon emplacements that were there. And then you think about hiking up that mountain, you think about hauling cannons.
Cannon, and 4 of them.
Hauling cannons up that mountain. Just it's mind-boggling to think about what they went through.
A very different type of war than what we experience today and in all the different wars ever since. I mean, the technology at the time compared to now, but yeah, getting those cannons up there and the placements, and they obviously just left them as the troops moved through. But yeah, worth a visit. It's the park itself is free, but there is a day pass use for your, actually they consider it a parking pass, but if you have like the America the Beautiful National Park Pass, that does work here, so it's a bonus if you have your National Park Pass. There is a visitor center here. Unfortunately, it was closed for New Year's Day, so we did not get to go inside and see the interpretive stuff here, but otherwise it's normally open, pretty much any day of the week. Try to make the visitors center your first stop if it's open, and then the trail starts right from there. And it's about a mile straight up the mountain. And by straight up, I mean they have made it sort of a little switchback, but it's not an easy climb. It's rated as moderate. It's a lot of rocks, a lot of roots, mud after it's rained, and Georgia red clay. So it's pretty strenuous for, if you're not in shape, bring good hiking boots, water, a hiking pole, and just know your limits. There are benches along the way so that you can stop at, both for the views and just to catch your breath. But don't do it in flip-flops for sure, or even like Crocs, because we saw a lot of people trying to do it in all sorts of footwear, and they were stopping to get rocks out of their shoes and complaining that their feet hurt. So definitely good hiking shoes.
If you're not quite up to the hike up the mountain for about a mile, there is a road that you can take. It's about 1.5 miles. You can either walk up that road if you want. You can take your bike, I guess, if you're crazy enough.
It would be a pretty steep. Actually, the down on your bike, I think, would be worse.
Would be worse, yes. But yeah, you can drive up there, and there's actually a parking lot, maybe then another 1/4 mile up from that, you would walk up to see where the cannon are and get to the peak, that kind of thing. So there is a road that you can take up there in a pretty good-sized parking lot. I will note that they say it's only open during the week. So on weekends, that road is closed, and you have to... Now, it's not running today. There's normally a shuttle, apparently. I don't know if it's down because of COVID or what they're doing.
Or it's just because it's New Year's and they're not open. We're not really sure. But...
So check ahead and find out if you're coming on the weekend. That road, though, is closed. So, but the parking lot down at the bottom is good size. There is some RV parking. There's a few spaces there for RVs if you have a little bit larger rig. So a motorhome anyway. So you'd be able to park there and do that. But keep that in mind. So it is available for people. You can, if you can't make the hike, you can drive up for a good chunk of the way. I certainly would. It's not ADA accessible, like to get to the cannons or anything. No,
because there's some pretty steep steps once you even get to that upper parking lot. And I mean, and that road is still no joke. I mean, you're climbing a mountain, so it's not like it's a flat paved trail. So I mean, we saw people pushing strollers, but it's going to be a pretty strenuous up and then a pretty steep down. So don't let your baby go woo woo down the mountain.
That would be bad. Yeah, so keep that in mind if you're trying to walk it, or even if you're thinking about driving a rig up there. You know, if say you're doing a van like we have, that would be a pretty good chug for it to get up there. So that's something to keep in mind. Where we are standing is not it's part of the national battlefield, but this is not a battlefield that we had here. We're actually where Camp Brumby was, which was a civilian conservation corps camp. And of course, once we saw there was a CCC camp, you had to come check it out. So,
of course.
But it plays a big role in this National Battlefield Park.
From 1938 to around 1942, Camp Brumby was responsible for building the Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park. So it helped put the trails in that take you up to the mountain, the park signs, and other structures that are here. So they're responsible for actually creating the park out of what was just a mountain here in Georgia. So we do have them to be thankful for. There were barracks, a kitchen, the typical buildings that came with a CCC camp. But as we've seen, other places we visited, they essentially just burned them and tore them all down when they left. So sort of a leave no trace policy, as you will. There's a handful of foundations left around here, but there are some interpretive signs to show you, where stuff was. And it really is at the base of the mountain. So depending on where you're standing here, you can look up and get a really good view of how high the top of Kennesaw Mountain actually is and how far those soldiers had to climb to, take over. It was pretty impressive.
I think it's 1,700 feet, right around there at its peak. So it's a ways up there, for Georgia, right?
Yeah. I don't know what elevation we're standing at. You're not climbing 1,700 feet, but I don't remember what our elevation gain was. I said
especially on a clear day, it does give you a really nice view of Atlanta, the current city of Atlanta, and all of its skyscrapers off in the distance. So, it's one of those things where anytime you're at a battlefield, it's sort of a somber experience in some ways, but it's really interesting to see what's still here. Thanks to the CCC, they did a lot of work also. You mentioned some of what they did with the trails, but they also helped to preserve some of the earthworks that were here that the Civil War soldiers had built. So it's because of them that remains. And in addition to coming here and paying your respects to both sides and what those men went through during the war and taking the trail up and down the mountain, it's pretty popular today. And I think it's probably popular all the time because there are a lot of trails here. So it's been interesting to see people just sort of enjoying the landscape.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a popular place, not just for tourists like ourselves, but for just people that live around here because of the trail system. We saw a lot of people running. I think they're using it as exercise. A lot of people walking their dogs. So that is something to note, is that you can bring your dog as long as they're on the leash. And it was very popular of all sizes of dogs today. And just people with families and people of all ages. So even though it is kind of a strenuous hike up the mountain, it's definitely worth checking out for a whole family, as well as some of the trails that are down here at the base of the mountain that you can just kind of walk through. And you're actually walking behind a lot of houses at some point here. So I can see where this would be a very popular place kind of year round.
Well, where we're standing at Camp Brumby, we're in the field where the camp itself was, and you can walk through here and see the signs and things. But there is a loop that goes around it. That's a nice flat trail that you could use for exercise or just to get out.
If you're up for a little more strenuous hike, by the time you get to Kennesaw Mountain at the top where the cannons are, you can actually keep going to Little Kennesaw Mountains. And then there's like 2 or 3 other mountain tops that you can keep hiking to. And I don't remember the total trail mileage, but I want to say like 16 miles, maybe we read somewhere. Again, didn't get to the visitor center, so I'm not 100% sure, but there's actually quite a bit to do here depending on, your energy, adventure level, and the type of weather, because if it was raining, this could be pretty slick.
But on a nice clear day, I'd love to get to the top of that mountain and see what the view is like up there. It was a little cloudy today and hazy, but it was still interesting to see it all. So if you're in the Atlanta area and get a chance, get over here to the Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield Park. I'd recommend it.
Very much so.
So get out here if you can. Keep on trekking.
And we'll see you out there. If you're up for a more strenuous hike, when you get to the top of Kennesaw Mountain where the cannons are, you can actually keep going and you'll see little kind of start that over.